All right, welcome to this week's episode of The Badge and Beyond, everybody. Today we have Raymond Zhai from Zhai and Associates. Raymond, you may have found him on TikTok. He likes to give a little bit of legal advice, general only, to his audience. Raymond's quite a funny guy though, criminal lawyer. So look, we thought it'd be great to have him on for the mere fact of shits and giggles, right? Everybody knows most of the time cops or ex-cops and criminal lawyers don't get along. But I really thought it would be quite interesting to get his perspective on criminal law and policing, and we might open the odd can of worms as we go. So hopefully this doesn't end in fisticuffs. That's why I bought Danny, so we can double team him, and we'll go from there. So pleasure to have you on the show, Raymond. Thank you very much for coming.
I'm ready.
I love it. Now, Raymond, you came on our radar, as I said, through TikTok. Tell us a little bit about how you, what brought you on that journey?
So, me getting into law was more a process of elimination rather than something I wanted to do. So I went to like a high achieving school where everyone's trying to be a doctor, lawyer, dentist, or investment banker.
Typical defense lawyer, humble brag, not so humble. Yeah.
So yeah, I was terrible at maths, so I couldn't do investment banking or anything corporate finance. I didn't want to study for 10 years to become a doctor. And I failed the exam the really hard exam you have to do to become a dentist. So I picked law. Also tried a few different areas of law, immigration, property, and it was a lot of paper pushing. Yeah. And I thought, God, it's gonna drive me insane. Back then, music festivals and raves were becoming a big thing, and it's something I'm into. And so I went to a lot of those. Naturally, you meet people, they're doing drugs, they get into trouble, and I met a criminal barrister who was like, "Look, we're not the richest area of law, but we're definitely the sexiest."
I like that.
Oh, well,
we do the sexiest branch of law.
Yeah. And I thought, well, I know a lot of people that get into trouble, and then I guess criminal law sounds pretty interesting. Yeah. So I fell into that. Found a job with a lawyer up in King's Cross by the name of Brett Galloway. Stayed with him for 4 years. And then when COVID hit, went to start my own business. And because we couldn't go out anywhere, I was thinking, how do I market myself? And then TikTok was becoming a big thing. My girlfriend at the time showed me this video of an American lawyer American lawyer who was doing TikToks. And then I was just, fucking around in my room, made a funny video, put it up, and then it just snowballed from there. I was on like a bunch of news shows for a week, and then I was nobody again. But people have kept watching me, so I guess it's resonated with an audience, and it's been an integral part of the business for me.
I have to say, as we mentioned just before we started, that I watched a few of your clips, and Jenny, our producer, actually introduced us to your clips, and I was like, he's so right. Sometimes you give advice, it's just like, don't say stupid stuff to the cops, and it's true. Yeah. We've had times when you're talking to someone like, we're already looking at you for something, why would you try to offend us or give us more reason to go after you and say stupid stuff, right? Exactly. I used to call it like the attitude test or the respect test. If you respect me, I'll respect you. We all just get along, do what we need to do. If you're disrespectful, it's going to go bad.
It never made sense to me. It's so counterintuitive. Like, if I want something from you, why would I insult you?
Yeah, exactly.
Set you. Exactly. And in any other place, like say you want to get a better price off a garment, you don't sit there and berate the salesperson. Exactly. If anything, look, come on, can you help us out? Bit of humor, whatever, you might get something. Yeah. That's how normal life works. Exactly. I distinctly remember, I'm very traffic infringement averse, right? I hated doing that stuff as a cop. And if you got a ticket from me, you did something seriously wrong or you really pissed me off, right? Yeah. And I remember distinctly coming out, I remember back in the day it used to be called the RTA, and now it's RMS or whatever the hell it is now. So we're driving on the lights, fully marked police car. Yep. I'm the driver, I've got someone with me that's junior. I'm stopped at the lights. There's a car right in front of me, right? And like you could see, it was orange, and it's slow. Yeah. So we're slowing down. I'm like, there's no way this person's gonna go where I'm right behind her. as it's going from orange into red, that's when she decides to cross in front of everybody. And I'm like,
and because it's in front of everybody,
it's in front of everyone. So what do they think? What do I think I'm going to do? So I wheel her over, right? Pull over, and I just walk over to her and I say, well, I don't know what that was. I go, surely you didn't look into your revision mirror and see me.
See, I conditioned myself to check all the mirrors when I saw the lights.
If you think you're going to do something, you'll have a sideways look.
I was waiting for him to say, I condition myself to check every angle before I run a red light.
So I pull her over and I can straight away see she's a staff from the RMS, like from the...
No way.
Yeah. She got the logo. So I'm thinking she's going to be like half decent in terms of how her approach with me and think, some people have a brain snap sometimes. Yeah. But she just turns, she goes, what did you pull me over for? I go, you're not serious, right? She goes, I know the road rules. And I'm like, so because you're behind the desk at the RMS, I go, yeah, so do I, right? Kind of have to enforce it. Yeah. What was that? And she's like, no, it was orange when I left the thing. And I'm like, cool, there's actually an offence for driving through amber light. Yeah, I'll give you that. I got no issue. But what are you doing? I go, so we sat there having an argument about the traffic control system and why there's an orange before red. Like, you had no reason whatsoever to just cross the intersection. Anyway, I said, look, I'm the last person to give you a ticket on things, but I can't believe how much you're pushing me because you're just basically telling me I'll do this every single time and there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing. Meanwhile, they call an urgent job at the time and I'm just like, oh, the conflict. And so it's not until I start taking her registration because I need to go to this job. I start taking her registration plate down there. She's like, what? Are you going to give me a ticket? I'm like, what? Where do you think this was heading? And so you think to yourself, why would you do that? When a simple you
talked yourself into a ticket.
Yeah. Hey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. That would have been it.
And look, cops have a name for it. It's the attitude test. Yeah. Right. The number of times I just walk up to people and go, hey, if someone says, yeah, look, my bad, I was speeding or whatever else, no dramas, on your way, mate. Just don't do it again. You check their traffic record to make sure they're not wanted or there's no warrants. They haven't done 100 different things. Yeah. Giving mum and dad tickets or, P-platers that are doing 5Ks over, there's no point. It's really about saving people.
Do you see that? Are they telling you this is what happened? You're going, why would you even do that?
Look, I do have times where they've admitted it and the cop goes, I understand. And continues to write the ticket. You're like, why did I? I'm never going to be nice again. Yeah. But yeah, I've seen it go both ways. So
once they've started writing, you can't. That's not at least on the old books, you can. I know they've got the new mobile system where they do it, so I don't know how that works, but yeah, you couldn't in the old books with the triplicate thing. Once you put pen to paper at any point, that was it.
Yeah, and now everyone's filming the police, right? Which just makes things worse. Yeah. Just makes things worse. It's never just I'm filming you. There's always comments. And it just escalates and suddenly...
Yeah, because now they're filming because I'm going to post this and watch...
and get all over TikTok.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'll see a lot of these videos, I'm like, you're just being an idiot. Yeah. Everything, the cop's doing nothing wrong. Yeah. He's doing his job, you're being a moron. Yeah. You're just trying to inflame this and make it look like... Oh, then it's strategic editing. Yeah. Oh, look how they grabbed him. They didn't see before. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of that rubbish too. 100%. Yeah. Look, I think from us... Before we did this journey into investigations, post-police, at the time, I think a lot of the cops are like, with the criminal lawyers, but how are you defending this bloke? Yeah. How do you defend this bloke? Can you tell us about that from your opinion?
I already know what he's going to say because I've had this conversation with solicitors time and time again. I'm
very interested to how does that, because a lot of people that listen to us are actually serving police at the moment as well. So you'd be surprised they have this sort of how can they do this?
Okay, so I guess in simple terms, how do you defend a guy that's guilty? Well, a lot of the times, if I think you're guilty and the evidence says you're guilty, I'll give them that advice. And usually, if they don't like it, they'll find a lawyer that will tell them what they want to hear, because a lot of the times they kind of want to be lied to. And I've lost a lot of big clients because I've just been straight up with them. Yeah. Because there's the notion that, they can't prove this, they can't prove it. And there's a misconception where beyond reasonable doubt means, you have to prove everything. And if you can't prove this, I get off, right? But it's actually what is the most realistic alternative story to all of this evidence. And that's a hard thing for people to grasp. It's not just, you can't prove it, then I'm just going to stay silent and I'm going to get off. You actually, if you go to trial, we actually have to tell a story, an alternative story to what you guys are telling, and it's got to be convincing enough that the jury will go, oh yeah, that makes sense. So that's a big misconception. So in short, I tell them that you should plead guilty because then I can argue for a reduced sentence based on, why you did this, mental health, disadvantage upbringing. But yeah, I actually tell clients that you should plead guilty, and oftentimes they will just find someone who will tell them otherwise. Like, I can get you off, bro, etc., etc.
What if someone says, yes, I hear what you're saying, Raymond, but no, I'm still going to stay with you, but let's just run with it anyway. I'm going to give you instructions. These are my instructions. And I think this is something I didn't understand when I was a junior cop, that solicitors get instructions and they have to follow the instructions, right?
Up to a certain point, right? You can't just be a mouthpiece for the client. As in, you have, I guess, a bullshit detector. You have judgment, right? You can decide whether your client's story makes sense or not, right? One of my most serious clients, she had a lady staying with her. She was looking after the kids in return for a place to stay. She used drugs. She took the daughter, a young 6-year-old daughter, out for a car ride one day, crashed the car. She got tested on the side of the road. She had meth in her system, and the client basically, I guess, inflamed the situation in her mind, like, you put my baby in danger, etc., etc. And then basically with 3 other guys detained her and like did horrific things to her and basically dropped her down the road, right? This is up in regional New South Wales where like the houses are quite far apart, and didn't even drop her that far away, right? She's the only one with motive, drops her down the road, the neighbor just opens the door and goes, whoa, like, gotta call the cops, right? And she's like, didn't do it, don't know what happened. I wasn't even there, right? He's like, you're the only one with motive, right? She ends up down the road and some random neighbor who is not involved in this at all calls the cops. Like, how are you gonna explain, right, how this, and the neighbor took photos of the injuries, and I asked her, like, fill in the gap for me, what actually happened, right? And she's like, comes up with this wild story that's just completely unbelievable. And I said to her, if we go in front of a jury and run this story, you're going to lose your 25% discount for detaining in company. Like, that's a long time.
Yeah, it's serious. It's serious.
And then she just ran us around in circles to a point where I said, look, it seems like there's a breakdown in trust. And for lawyers, we can terminate a client if there's a breakdown in trust. And well, long story short, she went to another lawyer and she's now doing, I think, 10 years with 5 on the bottom. Yeah. So 5 years non-parole. Wow. Yeah. So ended up pleading guilty, basically. So
has there ever been someone come to you and you're like, you've listened to their story and you're just like, I can't represent you. Like, you've looked at the charge sheet or something like, well, no, can't do that.
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Oh, sorry.
So I've learned over time that there is no price that you can put on, I guess, peace of mind, right? The good thing about having my own business is I get to choose my clients, right? So if I see a case that I guess morally don't agree with, then I don't take them on, right? I will, avoid taking the case in a number of ways, but in short, I like to be able to sleep at night. Yeah. Sometimes there's no amount of money that can,
Is there a particular category of cases where you're like, we just don't do that. And maybe you call it whatever it is, like we don't specialize in that space, or there's better people for that, or is it like on a case by case basis you review them when they come in and you're like, you get a sense from reading that this is not one that you feel comfortable with?
So for the longest time, I thought personally that I wouldn't do any sex crimes. I've been getting a lot more of those recently, and I think that I want to take them on just out of curiosity, just to see psychologically what's going on in that person's head. I started criminal law for two reasons. I like the business side of things, and I also like the people, the stories, the psychology, or what's making them tick. Yeah. And so when I read the facts, I'm like, that is so fucked up. Part of me goes, but you did this in front of CCTV. Like, what drove you so much that you knew you were going to get caught, but you had to do this horrible thing to a child in front of CCTV in a supermarket? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think.
But actually, to answer your question, DV cases actually, when I see that, for example, they're charged with domestic violence, but they're in denial. There's so much proof that they did it, but they're in denial. Oh, she's crazy. She made me do this. You know, it's toxic. I won't take responsibility for my part. It's all her. She's crazy. She's crazy. She's crazy. Yeah. That's what. Yeah.
It's the standard line, and that's what people forget. And I think even family law is another one for that, where people forget the family law magistrate or the family law judge has sat there and heard 45,000 versions of you in the last 10 years, right? Saying the same shit. I mean, I think for me, the where I was a bit different to most of the police in their views of lawyers is because I was for many years the domestic violence officer. So I was doing DV list day.
As in the liaison?
Yeah, so I'd be the one telling our prosecutor, because the prosecutor's not going to look at 90 AVO applications, right? So especially where I was at Bankstown, it's one of the highest amounts of AVOs in the state, right? So I would be relied upon in my team to instruct, right, on what's happening. So then the lawyers would come and sit with me. Are they going to consent with our admission? What's going to happen? And then you start to understand, some of them were like, they'd be like, this guy. Like, they're not comfortable with, some of the stuff were horrific, some of the things that were going on. And they know, he would say to me, he goes, no.
Sometimes I give the DVLOs a look. I'm like,
this guy needs to be away from this woman.
My client, but in no way do I condone anything he's doing.
And especially when they're using it as leverage and not letting see the kids and all that kind of stuff. And I remember with a couple of lawyers, I get real good respect for them. Like, these guys, I can understand. There is significant humanity involved in this thing at the end of the day, and it's not just. Also, cops also fall for the TV stuff when it comes to what lawyers are and what they do. Do you know what I mean? Until they've had that constant experience, where they're now sort of having interaction with the lawyers in different spheres, but a lot of the times, especially in GDs, you're only coming out. You're seeing them for that. You know, the brief gets called, whatever. You go. You have this. It's a small local court kind of hearing, and it is for usually a DV assault or a drink drive or whatever the hell it is. You don't really see why they're representing this bloke. But until you have that sort of conversation, because cops don't really have that opportunity to talk. It's different in the Ds in certain things, I'd say.
I have to say my first long trial, I think, I had like 100 witnesses, 100 exhibits. I had two defence teams working with QCs. And that was the first time when I sat down, because I just started having, I'd have morning tea and lunch with the DPP, right? And having tea and coffee, whatever else. And then one day, one of the defence walked over and sat down and they talked, and I'm kind of like, oh, the defence, bastard.
What are they trying to get out of me?
Yeah. I'm like, I'm listening to everything, I'm trying to analyse everything, and they get up and go away, and then they come back. I'm like, hey, why did you just invite those guys to come and sit with us? They're like...
There's that natural distrust until you actually talk to them.
The lady the DPP Crown prosecutor, she's now gone on to be a judge, but lovely lady. She's like, oh, we're all the same. Don't trust me, it's okay. I know, I've got friends that are cops. I know what you think. It's okay. And so then you sit down and I'm like, talking to these guys, doing whatever, and then I go into the box, they get cross-examined for 6 days, and I'm like, we just had tea and coffee and whatever else, and you're trying to tear me a new one, yet then we walk outside, and I think at the end of the cross-examination, we're all done, one of the defence guys goes, mate, I'm sorry, but I was under instructions. He specifically told me to ask you those stupid questions. I know they were ridiculous, but I had to put on a show for my client. Okay, and I started to get an understanding.
Yeah, it's all theatre. It's all theatre in there.
It really is.
There's so much theatre in there.
I was the type of guy that was really I had this ideology of justice and trying to help and do things, but when I lost a case, it cut me. Like, it really hurt. So then I realized that wasn't going to be great for my mental health. I had to kind of treat it more like a game. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to win some, I'm going to win some. My job is to win more than you, do the very best, like kind of like a competition, do the very best I can to win ethically, and get all the evidence together to show that what I think is correct. But that also made you really good investigations. It made you look for every way out of it, which meant you got good exculpatory evidence if it was there, and it opened up more lines of inquiries. Or you closed off every piece of exculpatory evidence that existed and you didn't get surprised in court, so you didn't go to court as much. I'm like, beautiful. But it took that time. And I remember asking the big bugbear, I think, for cops, tell me if you're wrong, child sex offenders. Yeah. If you're a child sex offender, it's very hard for police officers to understand how anybody would defend them. And I had this conversation with a number of solicitors. This used to just be my just picking at the scab. And the usual response I got was, oh, well, first of all, everybody's got a right to a fair trial, mate.
The classic. Yeah. The classic line.
Yeah. So take that off the back of the cornflake packet. What's next? And then they say, but, and my argument to them would be, okay, so you're really good at what you do. I do a great brief, but of course we know what the witnesses are. They're children, they're vulnerable people, they can't give great evidence. You're amazing as a solicitor or a barrister, you get them off. That person's now in the community. Well, what happens when they offend again? Oh, they might not offend again. I said, but actually we tend to know that there's a lot of evidence that they many cases will. What about that? Well, you should have done a better job. I said, but I've done everything I can because I can't elicit evidence that doesn't exist. I can't make stuff up. I've been ethical. I said, tell me this, would you let that guy babysit your kids? And my favourite was this lady, a female defence solicitor, and she says, no. I said, why not? Because I'm not an idiot, she says. I said, but the person that's the neighbour to this guy doesn't know that he's that, and he offers to babysit, and she's a single mum, and she lets her, she's got no other options. But everybody deserves a fair trial, Anthony, she says. I'm like, all right, you're scum.
It's just the things that you learn in law school that you just say without really thinking it. Yeah. And so for me, I have thought about this over time, and for me, it's a combination of curiosity. And if I truly believe that they're innocent, I will fight for them. If I believe they're guilty, I'll give them that advice. But to watch an innocent sex offender get off, just saying those words out loud, I have to see my friends and family and tell them, oh yeah, I just got a guilty sex offender off. I'm like, I don't need that in my life.
I know. What's funny is with some of the lawyers that have really sort of taken off on social media, and others that are trying, what used to disturb me a bit is the posts, especially when I was still in the cops, the posts about 3 affray, 2 resist, 6 assaults, blah, off kind of thing.
There's an American lawyer that does that.
Yeah, and there's like, there's a couple here down the road. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know if I'm cheering that, right? Three times breach of AVO, blah blah blah, GBH, and I'm like, I don't know if I would brag that, because does that mean he didn't do it, right? Because in a domestic, let's really think about this. Who else is there? Yeah. Right. Like, what are the chances that some random did these injuries to you, or it was self-inflicted? Yeah, I'd break my own jaw, right?
I had to run a case like that once. So it was an on and off again friend, I guess. Yeah. And she would come over to the house after he finished work. And on this particular occasion, his whole family was home. Like his whole family, like it's 4 other people. And she has a habit of coming around, and I guess he sends a bit of mixed signals, but then she's like, you've been cheating on me, I thought we were together, we're not together, are we together? And that sort of thing. She's also a drug user, so she's a heroin addict, and the family basically says, look, you guys like she needs to leave. So kicks her out of the house, and then she calls the cops. 5 minutes later, they come, and then she's got a bite mark on her face, right? In the shape of some very long nails that she had. And then she had some very tight necklaces, and then she had all these like burn marks. And basically she said, oh, he choked me like 5 times, and each time he choked me for like 5 minutes. And we're like, 5 minutes. Yeah, okay, yeah, right.
That's a strong threat.
She should get into MMA.
Crazy. And just as she gets kicked out, another family member is coming home from work. And so if it wasn't for all those other witnesses giving very compelling evidence, you know, that there was no injuries when she left, right? He could have been found guilty, but I managed to create some doubt, because I genuinely thought there was some doubt based on how she described the choking, and the fact that she had these marks that were very similar to putting long nails in her face, and, you know, pulling her necklaces a little bit. But it's very rare. It's very rare that I have those cases. But when I genuinely see something that I believe the guy's innocent, I will fight hard too.
We've seen that, because now that we do investigations, a lot of our work is with lawyers, including criminal lawyers. We'll get the brief and look at it and go, hold on, that doesn't make sense. How did this person? How was he here? So 100%. There are definitely cases where there is a real merit in. There needs to be a strong defence to what's happened, because, you know, police don't always get it right. And also, again, as Anthony said, witnesses aren't the greatest sometimes. They're victims, right? So you don't know what happens. Sometimes you're like, there is just no way this person's involved in this scenario, and especially when there's co-accused and people have all been drawn in with this net. And we'll find details, and like, that doesn't make any sense. And we'll have those conversations with the lawyers and go, yeah, we think this has happened, and follow the evidence.
So has your view on I guess the criminal law changed as you've gone out of the cops and become?
I think it.
Oh, I guess accused persons.
Well, the interesting thing is this, right? Even in the cops, and especially the Ds, there's always that one person that you're like, that guy's terrible, right? Like, they're just a terrible cop. Most police officers listening or watching this podcast, when I say that, will go, they have a name pop into their head. They're like, anybody that person investigated was in harm's way because that cop sucked, number one.
What makes them?
Well, look, it's
a bad cop.
And that's a good question, because there's so many different. Sometimes it's just laziness, and I need to point out that right now in the police force, people are walking off like out the door. Like, I think I heard of a station the other day with like 5 detectives left in 1 week. So
600 left this week, isn't it? 600 that left this week?
Something crazy. And like going off and leave. So the official numbers don't reflect how many, and they've extended, by what I'm told, the amount of time it takes before you get your payout to leave. So where it used to be like 6 or 9 months, now it's like 18 months. So they're still technically occupying positions, but they're on medical benefits or whatever. But stepping aside from that, the reason I bring that up is because the people that are left, and we're talking about sometimes 60 stations at 60% capacity, they're under the pump. If they weren't under the pump before, they definitely are now. And so that means they're doing the bare minimum to get past. Now, some of those cops are either just, they somehow passed what we'd call the numpty test. Like, for whatever reason, you just don't have the nous to be a cop, in that someone tells you something and you believe it automatically, and you take their statement down and you never question your witness or victim, even when it doesn't. Like, we look at things like, you took one statement and you've based this whole brief off one statement, yet you never tested any of that evidence. There's CCTV and you didn't look at the CCTV. There's 3 other witnesses, but you didn't get statements from those people. And I don't know whether it's negligence or laziness or whatever else. And some people, honestly, I swear they just don't understand the law. There is this occasional cop that turns up and you're like, sorry, you did what?
I remember you guys in one of your episodes talked about your time at the academy. You said it was a 14-week course?
It is if you're a graduate coming in,
right,
but you did more courses. But I have to say the best course in the cops to be a cop was the detectives course. And the reason for that was that was the first time anybody ever took me beginning to end through the Evidence Act. So there's all this stuff they give you at the academy saying, oh, you can't do this and you can't do that. I'm like, hang on, you mean it's codified in law? Sorry, what? It's not just don't do this, don't do that. It's actually, there's a big act and you can read it and you can look at case law and it makes sense. Okay, that's why I don't do that. And there's a whole bunch of stuff they never taught you, you know?
And so how long is that course? And you're saying it's a detective course?
Detectives course takes a year, but by this stage to get in the detectives, you've already done anywhere between 2-3 years minimum, and then you've done 6 to 12 months before you do like a panel interview, and then you're a plainclothes constable, you're designated plainclothes, and that's when you're doing your D's course. But the D's course takes a year. It's like a advanced diploma kind of thing. It's quite intensive though, like the criminal law, evidence law, you're sitting in like 8-10 hour lectures. So you've already got pre-knowledge, there's pre-readings and stuff to do. Then you like basically in lectures all day, and then you get an exam on the Friday. So I think evidence law, we did the entire act in a week, but then you did an exam Friday and you had to get like a pass mark of, I think it was like 75 or 80% to get through.
So before this course in the detectives, what legal
So you get legal training.
training? Yeah, in 1 year before you become a cop. Yeah.
You get like the law components and things like that, but it's a lot around the offences and the proofs of the offence and what. And then it's not that they don't talk about the Evidence Act, but they'll just say something like this is deemed hearsay. Yeah. Okay. But you're in the academy, you don't understand that the Evidence Act exists, right? They don't talk about probative versus prejudicial. Yeah. They don't talk about all those other elements that are, and really the Evidence Act, I think, is such an important thing to understand why you turn up with all this, what you think is evidence, then it gets argued in and argued out. You're like, how did that get argued? As a uniform guy, like, how? Yeah. But you just took my brief and washed away half of it. Yeah. And now, of course, it doesn't look any good because I've only got half the brief. But but it's because you didn't understand, So while it's there, it's kind of like, I won't say churn and burn, but they're kind of more like directions or instructions of you can't do this, but there's no deeper understanding of why you can't do that.
And it's also like, what's the time? Like the thing is, you do your studies, and as you come out, you're still studying, right? Yeah,
there's a year's worth of study.
Still, as a probation constable, you can't get your first stripe. You can't get your confirmed constable until you finish that course, right? Which is now an associate diploma or something like that. But as you go, or associate degree, sorry. Even then after, if you're just doing general duties, until you kind of do the investigators course, which is another course that gives you a bit more fundamentals on what you need, which to me you should probably have straight away. Because what's in there is pretty foundational, and you should know this to put briefs together. But some people would have done 9-10 years and still haven't done the investigators course, if you're in GDs.
It's crazy how the training that's given to police officers and lawyers seems so different, and yet you guys are held to the same standard as lawyers, and you guys get ripped into by magistrates and judges.
Nowhere near the amount of prep, right? That's the thing, because also here's the issue. Like, so I did a lot of my years as general duties before I specialised in different areas, and again at a busy station, you're getting a lockup almost every shift, right? So then where do they go? Not everyone's pleading guilty, okay? So even your stock standard shoplifter, I had shifts where I'd done 3 shoplifters in one shift, right? So then, okay, let 1 out of every 3 go not guilty. I'm going to have a hell of a lot of briefs I'm going to need to do, right? And then there's a process. So then I put my brief together. If I'm lucky enough, I've got someone senior that can look over it for me, right? If he's got the time to do that. And then it's passed up to another supervisor, then given to the brief handling manager, who's got like all that happening, like a hell of a lot of briefs to go through. How significant is my little shoppy compared to whatever he's looking at or she's looking at? And then it makes its way to the prosecutor, who then all they'll do is, this is crap, do this, do this. There's no rationale behind it. There's no, here's an education moment.
And right? The prosecutor only gets it that morning, right? They're only looking at the 15 briefs they're going to go through that morning or whatever else. Yeah. So it's not like they're helping you out. at any point in time going, hey, look, go get this. And you're hoping it gets put over for another date or the hearing gets vacated and they've looked at it and gone, oh, you missed like 3 key things, like go and get that for us.
And should you lose or get a failed prosecution, it's a complaint. Go and explain that. So there's all that kind of pressure on you to get this right. If you're lucky, you've got good mentors. Like you've had good senior officers that have taken the time to go, hey, this is what you should put. But even for me, learning identification evidence as a probationary constable, it just came because I was lucky enough to work with really good senior people. So trying to, because the first thing they'll be like, you're not going to get up because the identification evidence is wrong. Don't put him in the car and drive him. There was all these, we would learn all these strategies, right? I remember we had 10 guys that we just stopped and searching, and I could hear the detectives going, okay, we just might drive past with, and then they're arguing about whether that's going to be solid identification evidence. Are we going to do ID parade? What's going to happen? And things. And I'm just like 3 months in going, what the hell is going on? Because there's this argument with 2 senior detectives going, you can, but you can't, right?
And you're trying to work out, you're trying to read between the lines rather than actually be told the reasoning. You're trying to work out what the reasoning is.
What am I doing here? Then I'm thinking to myself, well, why can't this is the guy that the witness describes, why can't the witness come back and go, that was him? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Then you're like, oh, but how does it look? The cops already got someone grabbed. If you were 50-50, now it fits like it's a criminal. So that when the witness points it out, but then it gives you a lovely thing for you to argue.
Yeah. And you don't know the psychological studies that have been done to make this thing a rule. Yes. And I think over time, when I started, there was a thing about like cops are just out to get the client and cut corners and do all this terrible things. But over time, I've come to have a lot more empathy in that you guys are just under the pump, right? You guys have to learn such a complex area of law, but don't receive the adequate training
or the money.
And sometimes you just it's time pressures,
all the death threats, all the life in hand. Think about all the calculations someone is making, and then it happens on scene. You do what you need to do in a high, intense, unsafe environment. You're making judgment calls, and if you didn't collect the right evidence in the right way at the time, now I've got someone on the other side who has spent years studying this, getting paid adequately with resources against me.
And they have months to prepare this case, look through every little detail where you guys collected the evidence on the night, having to deal with so many environmental factors.
So if you roll the numbers, we should always lose. Yeah. Right?
And it is like, I remember being in the Ds where you're doing a crime scene at, you're supposed to finish at 2 or 3, and there's a GBH, there's a mal-wounding, there's, stabbing, shootings, whatever, anyway. I'm barely keeping my eyes open. I'm trying to thinking, you've got 5 in the dock. You're like, okay, how do I got to interview this guy, but I've got to work out the timeouts and, oh crap, and you're trying to do whatever. Or the brief is due for a complex, strictly indictable matter. You turn up at 6 o'clock to get an early start on the brief. And they're like, oh, by the way, we didn't call anybody out, but there's an armed robbery going. We got one in fucking custody. Can you duck down to that? But I'm not even on. And then you'd be like 5 o'clock going, okay, I've just caught a whole new brief. And I've not touched the one I need to get to. I'm just going to work back. And like all the GDs or whoever come up and go, oh, good, you're still here. So I've got this case. And like, And then the duty officer walks in and goes, you're not on overtime, are you? No, I'm working because I need a brief to get organised. I've got to get it served. I've got to serve something. Right. Well, as long as you're not on overtime, you're not burning out, are you? Well, where the hell, it's all those different things, and you're not, like you said, you're not getting paid. It is crap. And by the by, that's why I try not to be too hard on cops, but sometimes they're their own worst enemies because they do just go, oh, well, yeah, I'll go out and do next job. And that makes sense. And there's a good reason why you do that.
Because the paperwork's boring, but the catching the guy is the sexy part.
But it's also because the jobs just pile up and the rest of the teams are out there managing. And when you first start, you're like, how is everybody doing all this paperwork and going and doing great lockup? But they're just faster and they do multitasking better. But what they probably should do, if policing was done right, you get your lockup, you come back, you do your brief. Yep. Right? Yep, done. He's in the bin. I get all the witnesses in. I do whatever. Everybody gets a corridor day at least once a week to go get themselves sorted. but we'd need like 3 times as many cops than what we've actually got on the books, not actually what we have. Yeah. And it would just be way too burdensome.
And right now they're all just walking. They're all just walking out.
Yeah.
I mean, like some of the best advice you would get from other senior police was the ones that had been smashed in the box, right? So they'll be like, I'll be working with someone. They're like, Danny, come, let's go back to the station now. He goes, start typing up your statement now. Yeah. He goes, that's while it's fresh, while it's right, it corroborates. You can read out your statement. It's contemporaneous. Make sure the notes are good. Know where you are. Know where the location. Like just all the stuff. And in the beginning, when you're doing it, like this is boring as batshit. I don't want to do this, but it was a good habit to pick up. You're like, now's the time I take the notes because I don't want to be trying to refresh my memory from this and what the hell, what was he wearing, how, and then you start with those questions about estimating. You hate your life. Can you estimate how long it took between this and that? That's great if you ask me about something that happened yesterday. 3 years ago, freaking, I'm screwed. I don't know.
Sometimes doing it too early is bad though. I found I had better recall the day or 2 days afterwards because I was so close to the actual incident at that time that you just like, you kind of focus on the main points. You miss the in-between things that were kind of vital later on. Yeah. And then you end up doing like statement number 2 and it looks like you've not done.
Exactly. Why did you make another statement?
Yeah.
Why did you?
Yeah, I find that line of questioning is not as effective because knowing how the human mind works and the way we remember things, in the moment especially, you just have the main flashbacks and then you sit with it for a bit, you process it, and then all these other details start to come to light. And so, that traditional line of questioning with lawyers is not very effective.
Where are you seeing most cops come unstuck?
It's a good question. I think looking at statements between more junior police and detectives, you really see the difference in the quality of their statements. And I think the human mind naturally assumes things. We come to a crime scene or a complaint with a set of personal beliefs, and it could be simple as just you for example, it's a DV. You take the statement at face value, and you don't really think about, how do you know this? I just assumed because of these things that this other person did. But you can't actually read their mind, so you actually have to take it step by step and break it down. I think that's where the weakness is. The more junior you are, the more you assume things, the more senior you tend to really break things down bit by bit. And working with detectives is like a whole different ballgame to more junior. And I guess you learn through experience. You learn by getting shredded in the box, and you're like, I understand now because I just got completely torched, and that's going to be traumatizing. I'll never make that mistake again.
Like that was something I didn't learn until the D's course, which was courtroom tactics. And I was sitting there, and they had a Crown prosecutor come in. They start running through the different things, and I'm like, oh yeah, fell for that one, seen that one, definitely fell for that one. Sheesh. And I was like, where was that in the academy? You know, when someone says, so Constable McCarty, you're a professional police officer, aren't you? And
yes, I am.
Yeah, exactly. And then Constable McCarty, you try and you're a diligent officer, you try to do the best you can, right? You're not lazy, you're disciplined in what you do. You understand the law, obviously, don't you? And you hear this and you're like, oh, no, here it comes. You're like, I don't know what I did.
I don't know what I did, but I'm gonna know in about 3 questions. Like, there's the things. Yeah.
It's all those little things and you're like, getting smacked for stuff. And you're like, at the time, when you're junior, you fall into so many of those pitfalls. And the best thing is to have, like, when I got to the Ds, I wouldn't even put my stuff in through the brief manager. I had a few times sergeants like, hey, Macklin, you put your brief through the brief manager? Oh, no time, sergeant, it's got out, don't worry. I'm like, why not? Eventually someone's like, why don't you put in your brief through the brief manager? I'm like, I got to have it done 2 weeks before. That guy hasn't had as much training as I have. So, no. Like, no. Have you seen that guy? Like, there were some good guys in brief handling. When you had an XD in there, that was usually pretty good. Sometimes you had someone that thought they were better than they were and just nitpicked like spelling mistakes. And like, give a rest. get back on the truck and see how well you are with that. But sometimes it was like people are just sucked. And they just wanted a 9-to-5 job, and they sit there eating their cake and reading that. And I was like, no.
Where do the brief handlers sit in the structure of the police in terms of like ranking and experience?
Usually they're like a senior constable or a sergeant, but mostly a senior constable. And then it's a job that's coveted only because of the hours. You don't work weekends. You do your kind of 9 to 5, or your 8 to 4, or your 7.
There is a course just for them too. There is a brief handlers course that does give them but it's again the protocol stuff and whatever. See, one of the ones that used to work for us, she was a brief handler, and she was that at a constable rank. It can vary from station to station, but we had like initially a senior sergeant occupying. Yeah. But he was older than the building. Yeah. Right. So I'd been around, and I remember what was great about him is we'd have what they used to call a healthy lifestyles visit. So healthy lifestyles meant they'd come to do random drug and alcohol testing, or maybe not so random. And we would know if healthy lifestyles were in the room if that brief handling manager was off. Because he was notorious for rocking up drunk. Right. He was really, really old school.
So then we had older than the building, yep.
So then we had someone who actually, Now he knew his stuff because the guy was a guru, because he's been sitting there doing all this stuff. I think I saw him possibly smile once. That's because someone fell down in front of him. I was terrified of this bloke. Yep. When I as a junior, and so was everyone else. No one wanted to talk to him. He was just an angry, grumpy guy that probably he looked like he would have been like Gargamel's mentor. He was just sitting in some coven somewhere over some boiling. You don't even know who Gargamel is, do you, Jenny? You need to watch the Smurfs. Anyway, it was just that kind of thing. He had this amazing, elegant writing with this amazing little fountain pen, so you knew he looked at your work, and he'd just tear it to shreds. Yeah. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. Where this happened. Where that happened. And I think that's the thing with the police force in terms of any position, whether it's brief handling, whether it's anyone from the crime management unit, any detective, it's contextual, right? There are some amazing and some that are just rubbish. When I was in domestic violence, I used to run domestic violence training for the region, and I'd put together one of the workshops that I did to train the cops was I'd get a whiteboard and split it down the middle, and I wrote us, them, right? And I said, the question was, what prevents you from doing the perfect domestic violence investigation? Not prosecution, not conviction. What prevents you from making the perfect domestic violence investigation? And every single time I ran this, and I did about at least 30, every time I ran this, the police would always start with them, as in the other side. What everyone else, the public, the witnesses, all what their English wasn't great. They don't understand the law. They don't give a statement. They're scared, and then it would stop at about 7, and then they'd start on us. Unrealistic expectations from this supervisor. Back on next job, we can't keep up with this. We don't get paid. They won't give us overtime. We don't have access to sell bright. We don't have. We'd hit about 20, right? Wow. And I'd go to them. Isn't it funny? Like we straight away ran to the other side, but we are more a hindrance to an investigation than anyone else internally. And I said, if out of all of those, what do you think is the number one contributing factor? And you know what they picked? Which police officer does the job, right? So when I would be asked, what do you think was the biggest sort of determining factor? Who copies the job in the first place? Yeah. Wow. Right? And because we have this thing where if our parents need to call the cops, which one would we want to respond? Yeah. Right?
Great question.
So you'll never say that entire team. You're going to say, I hope it's this person or this person. You might have 2 or 3 people out of 18, out of 16, right? And if we're being really raw and real, that's how it would be. I would pick and choose who comes to my house or to my parents' house to respond to a job. And there would be matters when I was sitting as leading DV at Bankstown, we'd look at certain investigations and go, first thing I do, who are the car crews on today? And I'd look at the list. and go, all right, give it to 35. This is a serious one. I need good expertise on this. And that's how it is in most workplaces. You'll be the same. You're gonna sit there and go, oh, if this guy does the job, I'm gonna have headaches.
Not in Zhai and Associates, of course. Not anymore. Now he chooses his own people.
Now that you have your own, you're good.
I'm lucky I have a good team. They all have their strengths, and I also make sure that they teach each other, and so we all, improve together. But I guess in some workplaces you can't really choose your team, and you just got to work with what you got. And I've been in workplaces like that, and where the people coming through, free paralegals. I've learned that if you want good talent, you got to pay them, and you got to pay them well, right? Because the free paralegals, finishing law school, that just wanted to do some work experience, they just weren't invested. And why should they be? Because they're not getting paid, so they just.
You can't hold them to a standard because you haven't paid anything for it. Yeah.
And you'd think, oh, law students, right? But there's some really dumb, smart people out there. You'd be surprised, yes. Yes, I agree with that.
And I think
we see it all the time.
Like, you're so smart on paper, but what are you doing? Yeah.
Some decisions are baffling. What stands out for you in some of the matters that you've defended? What are some of the sort of like milestone cases that you...
Milestone cases. I guess my most...
He doesn't mean traffic by that either.
Oh God, no. Oh, Jesus. Actually, it did start from a traffic incident. My biggest case was a guy, Monday morning, he's driving a van down a street, and it just slowly veers into a parked police car at Eastwood Station.
As you would.
I know this story.
10 a.m. Just on CCTV. When you watch it, you're just like, what is he doing? Bang, and then it just keeps driving. He just keeps driving. Yeah, he keeps going. Yeah, they pull him over an hour later. He's got damage to the front of the van, and they say, "Oh, where are you going? Or where have you been?" "Oh, just was at Pizza Hut." And all right, cool. They decide to search him, and he's got 260 kilos of methamphetamine in his van. 260 kilos of methamphetamine.
What are Pizza Hut doing?
I thought it was pepperoni, Your Honour.
I do have to say, though, he was probably the most impressive client in terms of being able to stay silent, because he's being surrounded. He's slowly being surrounded. There's just more cars pulling in.
Oh, he's by himself.
He's by himself. They're like, why won't you say anything? He's just like staring at the ground, and once he knew what was happening, I've never seen someone remain so silent. For 20 minutes, they're just peppering him with questions. Why don't you say anything? Are you worried? Are you worried for the safety of your family, etc., etc., etc.? He was so silent that they don't know where the meth came from or where it was going. It was a single isolated incident, right? And essentially, he had micro-slept. He was partying a lot, right? He was gambling, drinking, like just had a...
It's got the tools.
Yeah. And so, they hired the wrong man for the job, and I guess all that sleep deprivation caught up to him at the worst possible moment. He only got 4.5 on the bottom because he was just a delivery driver, but he was like, I needed that. I needed that to happen in my life, because he got out and he was like working out in the prison. He got off the drugs, and he was like, I needed that to happen because my life was just kind of veering out of control, basically.
Yeah. Like the van.
Yeah. So that
did they ever track it up and get, like, do you know if they got any?
Nothing. Crazy.
See, that's where phone books were useful, I reckon. I never saw them, but they had to have been useful somewhere.
Yeah. So that's the first time I think I got on the news. Oh no, I at my old firm, my boss represented Slim Mahaja.
Yeah.
That was a fun 2-3 years. I think he had hired every lawyer in the city. I think he's gone through every lawyer in the city. But yeah, I think that was the first time I got in front of a camera, just as a little paralegal, just sitting on the side going, "Ooh, this is interesting."
He's as a criminal lawyer, he's the gift that just keeps on giving, though, right?
Yeah, and he was a nice guy when you spoke to him, but I think he was just the decision making process going on behind the scenes that just kept getting him into trouble.
You hear story like amongst cops.
Yeah.
I know cops that have, allegedly pulled him over and said, like the first thing you told him was, "Do you know who I am?" I was like, "No." Like, "Who are you?" I was like, "I'm the mayor of whatever, and or I'm this," and it's like, you just got pulled over for an RBT, mate. Like no one cares. Like he didn't fail. There was no issues with what he did. He just got, like in the story I heard, it's like, but you're starting out with, when someone starts with, "Do you know who I am?" Like, you're the son of your mother, I'm guessing. That's about all I've got. He was
a perfectly nice person to deal with. Yeah. I just think, I guess everyone has their flaws, and
Do you do a lot of drug work?
I think that's the main three would be domestic violence, drugs, not so much traffic now. It's becoming more sex crimes. But yeah, those would probably be the three.
What's your feeling on representing people that are committing drug crimes?
Look, for your career drug dealer, right? The one that just, you catch them, they get out, you catch them, they get out, you catch them, they get out. Look, they're running a business, and just like DV offenders, the psychology will take years to I guess change. You guys are trying to catch them. We're trying to find the weaknesses in your case, and it's a back and forth. You get them once, so sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. And I think I will say that there are squads that have been formed to deal with organized crime, and I think some of them have become very heavy-handed, and sometimes I guess that can spill over to the rest of the police force in dealing with ordinary citizens. So sometimes, I guess, even if my guy is guilty, but you guys have wrongfully arrested him using excessive force or just tactic intrusive on citizens' rights and stuff. At what point do you start to do that with, say, DV offenders or just more everyday sort of people? So that's probably my stance on that.
Yeah. Do you see it as when we were discussing this episode, there was some talk about whether it's like a health problem or do you see it as a health problem?
Definitely. I think one way to take the business out of organized crime is to just make it a health problem rather than a criminal problem. For example, trying to get one of my clients who's been addicted to drugs for many years into a residential rehab that doesn't cost like 20 grand a week, there's a wait list of 6 to 7 months. And so if you could just put more money into rehabs rather than more police for organized crime, or more investment in trying to get these seizures of coke, which there seems to be every week there's another half a ton here, half a ton there, but more just keeps coming in. Why not invest it in rehabs and stuff? Because we have programs like Alcoholics Anonymous for alcohol, and
There is Narcotics Anonymous.
Yep. And so, why not put more resources into drug rehabilitation?
I agree and disagree, and I guess there's not a lot of cops, and Danny and I started work during the heroin kind of epidemic where you couldn't stick your head in a dark place without seeing a junkie with a needle in his arm. And look, that was pretty sad in some respects because we've seen people degrade, and I felt for the people that sacrificed themselves. Like I think recently we were talking about sex workers, and because they were on the fringe of Bankstown and Campsie where we were working, and I felt sorry for. There was one particular individual I came across, and she was supporting her own drug habit. Her dad left, her mum got in a bad group of friends, she's supporting, and then her mum got on the drugs, her brother got on the drugs, she got on the drugs. They're all kind of couch surfing, doing whatever, and then the youngest daughter is like, by this stage, 19 or 20 when I come across her, and she's working as a sex worker, supporting the addiction of all the family and trying to, that's the only way she can make the money and put a roof over their head. I felt sorry for her, right? I feel sorry for the people that are truly addicted, but they'll do anything to get by. I feel less sorry for the person, and look, I had Harold the giraffe that came to school, etc. And there's a lot of cops that have come from bad upbringings where they could have chosen to go left or right. But intrinsically, they knew that punching the crap out of an old lady to take a handbag to get the $5 worth of pension cash that she's got left for their addiction was not the right thing. You know what I mean? So whilst I will look and say from a health perspective, yes, addiction is an issue and it needs more resources. I also don't look at everybody who I've locked up that's been a drug addict and say, oh, poor you. Because at some point in time, you made a decision, right? No one kind of goes into drugs and says, oh, there's no chance it'll ever addict me. I'm better than you. You kind of know it's a risk. It's like drink driving. You might think you're not going to get caught, but you also know there's a risk. From the perspective of organised crime, what I see with that is the need for those big squads is, yes, they're not touching the surface sometimes, but we also know that's because there's a huge amount that comes in constantly, and the people like you drag out the court process. So it's very hard for us to get through and get more cops on the street and doing the things they need to be doing, getting detectives out from behind the computer and doing the surveillance. But it is also organised. It's a good way to get rid of organised crime when we know they're attached sometimes, like drugs can fund terrorist plots. Drugs funds firearms and their use of that. Drugs equals drug driving, that people, running over people, killing them. They're ultimately responsible for the addict that goes after the grandma and makes people feel unsafe. When those guys that walk around and feel like they're untouchable, and you can't go to the shopping centre without seeing the hoodlums or the addicts or whatnot, and you feel unsafe in your own home, that's when drugs is a real issue. And the health issue of that is less of a concern to me than managing those guys that created their own issues, right? Having said all that, I 100% agree with you that the residential treatments are what is really needed, yet are super underfunded. And to legalise, there's a part that people don't speak about when they talk about legalising drugs, and that is just hypothetical numbers, complete BS that I'm making up, but just as an example, if 10% of the population knows that drugs are bad and drugs are illegal, but they still try them, that means 90% of them aren't doing drugs. But 90% of what element of that 90% of the population aren't doing it, not out of, they don't have curiosity, but they're doing it because it's illegal. So there's a whole bunch of people, you probably call them nerds and whatever else in school, or goody two-shoes, that would never break a law or speed or do whatever because it's illegal. When you legalise something, there's, you speak about psychology, there's kind of like a tick in the box of, well, the government wouldn't have legalised it unless it was okay. It must be okay to do this because it's legal. They wouldn't let me do something that was bad. And so I think there's that element that we're not speaking about in that phase where we're preventing people from getting into drugs that we might do if we legalised it. But 100% residential matters, residential rehabilitation. I mean, we know people, Danny's particularly tried to help people get into those things because through your connections, and it's very hard. It's very hard to get into those things. But I understand also, what's the cost on a residential drug rehabilitation room? I think the setup's millions of dollars.
It's like a private hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you've got detox and you've got rehab. Yeah. But the thing is, and I did a lot of this because we, in our work in the charity space, I started in providing drug and alcohol rehabilitation as part of our community work. Now, you brought up alcohol, and that's a very good point. And I think the argument can always go back to using alcohol. Think about alcohol during the Prohibition era. Yeah. What happened, right? Underground, what kind of economy started? They legal. So there's some lessons there that probably help out both arguments. And I think there needs to be a demarcation line with what an addict user is and what a supplier is and all that kind of stuff. And having seen a lot of that, where you're like, there are a lot of also addicts that aren't breaking the law.
Yeah.
They're destroyed. Yep, and they've destroyed their life.
Yeah.
They've taken a massive toll on their family.
Yeah.
Their family pay the price for this, but they're not out there, and the family are doing everything so that their son and daughter is not breaking into the neighbour's house next door. It's a huge problem. I definitely have seen nowhere near enough the government has done for that in terms of that kind of early intervention in that space. Now we're pill testing, we're doing this, we provided safe spaces for injecting so that other diseases that come with it aren't there, and people aren't getting Hep and AIDS and all that kind of stuff. But it's just like we never really get it right. No. And I think that's the same with DV. Yeah.
If you want to cut the budget for policing, it's very simple. Get rid of drugs, alcohol and gambling, right? Yeah. That will remove the need for probably about 60-70% of policing, because that is some of the root. Drugs and alcohol and gambling are some of the big issues in DV. There's some of the big issues in traffic. There are big issues in organised crime. If you could remove that, cops would be walking around with their hands in their pockets going, I don't know what to do.
As in removing...
Like if you could get that out of society,
Oh, yeah.
they're the key issues, but...
You lose your lawyers too.
Yeah.
we just have mental health issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's the thing, right? Like in terms of the argument for addiction, is it a disease? Yeah, but addiction is a serious health issue. It really is, no matter what the addiction is. Yeah. And it's just unfortunate that there are ravenous people out there that have built empires on exploiting that people's illness, right? And this is the thing, at the end of the day, it's as, imagine I am helping you get cancer and I'm getting rich over it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Cigarette company?
Yeah. So like there is a significant evil in the back end of this. Yeah. I think it takes up a lot, because also that's where all the property crime. Like same thing, like there's all this kind of stuff that happened. Yeah. It goes back to this singular issue of this void that's being filled, in this space.
I think a lot of the rationale for bringing, first-time drug possession offenders before the courts, even though they're going to get Section 10, was, they get a lecture from the judge about the actual flow and effects of their actions because they don't understand it, right? Yeah. But it takes up so much of the court's resources, and I think now they're issuing fines for that, which is freeing up a lot of the court's time for DV matters and more serious matters. But also, I guess, I agree with the organized crime. They take advantage of, people's addictions. But the same can be said for legal products such as cigarettes, alcohol, right?
Yep. And I don't smoke and I don't drink, so really none of that worries me. Yeah.
And I think after seeing that, I guess, one approach hasn't worked, yes, there are risks that the unaddicted population, or the population that hasn't tried drugs, will try it, right? Oftentimes, if you make something readily available, people will go, oh, okay, it's not that exciting anymore. And I think I advocate for just trying the health approach, because I think a couple of years ago with the music festival deaths, like there was calls for changing, I guess, the approach, but the government just kept digging in their heels. And I think, why not just try it?
Yeah, I think we're at a point, as I said, in the domestic violence world, you've got this argument about who you're funding, right? The funding now usually goes to your services, right? And don't get me wrong, those services need to be funded. But we have had no impact on domestic violence, homicide statistics for 20 years, with more laws, funding centres. Nothing has changed in the end of how many, especially women, die every year in Australia for DV homicide. So we're not getting it right.
Yeah. So it's like creating a bigger band-aid to put over the...
Here's the thing then, why then every grant, every whatever is the same shit, right? It pisses me off as someone that's been in the sector for a long time. Yeah. And if we're looking at root causes, if we're looking at, again, being simplistic here, before I get the hate about from little groups going, what about...
And the hate is coming down.
Yeah,
I know it's coming.
I don't care. Let them work in the sector, then talk. Early intervention into how, and again, be general, how a man sees a woman, right, as either his equal or his subservient, right? That's who's looking at that. And then if we're looking at behavior change programs and all that kind of stuff, cognitive behavior therapy, whatever it is, that takes a lot of time, right? So CBT is not a short process, and the healthy relationships education and how that works and those kind of counselling interventions should follow through. Healthy conversations about masculinity and all that kind of stuff. It's only slightly spoken about, but looking at how, how a father is the archetype to the child on how he treats the mother, for example, that's a huge contributing factor to what's going to lead to DV. Do you get what I'm saying? What are we throwing at that? So I think there's a lot of where, same thing in the drug world, we get it wrong, because you're right, we're doing the same shit, and the results are actually, if anything, I think sometimes things get worse depending on the availability of what's happening overseas and what we can source.
And look, when you think about it, and I take you back to that point too, the thing that made me a better detective was understanding that crime, for a lot of elements, is business. If you understand business, you understand crime. So whether it's drugs, whether it's guns, whether you look at like internationally, it's people smuggling and things like that. What's good business? And so when we seize, 50 tons of whatever, and then it gets publicised, someone goes, "Did you say shortage?" Okay, well, price just went up, people. And then someone overseas goes, "Hang on, so they're getting this much per gram over there. Let's take it from here and send it there because we'll get more." And that's the issue, right? If you want to tackle this, you've got to tackle it like business. And crooks do see the police as it's kind of like you do in a small business or any kind of corporation.
It's a cost. It's an expense.
Strength, weakness, opportunity, threat. Okay, well, our strength is we're really good at logistics and getting drugs in. We got a product that everybody wants, but the threat is the police might kick in our front door. But that'll only happen once or twice. It is one of those things. You have to understand business to understand this, and we've definitely got to change what we do. But I'm not one to sit there and say, "Oh well, there, little Johnny. Too bad." No, you made your bed, you lie in it. And the society needs to be protected from your bad choices. And I know that differs to a lot of people, but there's a lot of people that have had a hard life, difficult lives that have whatever and didn't go down that path, and it is a choice.
I definitely have different approaches depending on whether they are the drug addict or the.
And I guess it's like everything, context matters, right? Like there's no one, you can't say that this is how we deal with that and that's the same thing across the board. It's different.
Let me bring you to the topic of sentencing.
Yes.
Have you had situations where you're like, what the hell was that? So on either way, whether it was way lower than you expected or heaps worse than you expected?
It's crazy how sentencing so often falls into the judges that you're going to be in front of, whether they were an ex-prosecutor or an ex-defense lawyer. Like the sentences you can get can be wildly different. And there are occasions where you just get a really lenient result and you think, wow, I can't believe I got that. Like I wouldn't have given my client that, but I guess, but I think there's a common misconception that if you don't go to jail, then your sentence was too soft, right? Because if you send someone to jail and they still have the underlying problem when they come out, you didn't fix anything. Why not keep them in the community where they don't have to interact with, more hardened criminals and, do a little bit of networking. Learn how to not do it again not get caught next time. Build more criminal networks. Why not, keep them, keep them in the community, right? Get them into employment if that's why they got into it, or psychological counseling if there was mental health issues behind the thing. Like fix the problem, because you send them to jail, it's just kind of like a little holiday. You come out and you're either the same or worse. So
I think, and that comes back to the drug point for me, where I'm like, jail is where you've got a great opportunity to take them away from their peers. And then if you could isolate them amongst similar people with similar experience, if that makes sense, and run them through programs. But it's so hard for those people to get onto programs because everybody's trying to get onto the program so they get out and do whatever. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, a lot of parents of the addicts that I deal with would be like, I just want to get him locked up so he has to detox. Like this is so he can sort of, maybe this is the only thing that can happen. Yeah, can you get him custodial sentence so that he can,
and sometimes they can still access drugs in jail.
Yeah, correct.
We went to a talk recently where Justice Health was speaking, and there is a segment of the inmate population that they don't go in with a drug addiction, but they come out with one because of the buprenorphine that's available inside. So they develop an opioid addiction, which is insane. Yeah.
That is crazy. Have you ever had one where you're just like left field? Where did that come from? And we got absolutely smacked, and you told your client that you thought they were like they got a prison sentence. You thought they were going to walk, or
yeah, I think early in my I've learned to manage expectations very, very well, because I've just had those experiences where you think, oh, it's going to be all right, and then you get locked up and you're like, oh, I didn't tell him that was going to happen. Oh, how do I? He's like, what's going on?
Did they look at you like a lost puppy dog? Just kind of like, where are they taking me?
Eventually get them out on appeal, but I've had plenty of those moments. I can't think of a story that comes to mind, but definitely there are some moments where you're like, oh God, I didn't prepare him for that.
I have to say, as a cop, when you have those moments, you're like, this guy's going to get a Section 9 or something, you know, or it'll be like home detention, and they get let off down to the cells, and they're like, whoa, high five! You're walking out, you high five, and go, yes, I'm the best.
How do you guys feel about the sentencing process, especially, for example, when you put a big brief together and you're like, this is some serious shit, and then they just get a more lenient sentence than you were expecting?
I had a sentence that was actually bigger on me than it was on the crook, and that was as a detective, where it was, I think, the whole process beginning to end for the strike force took, I think, 20 months or something, and the crook got 18. I was like, I've been working on this practically doing something on this case day in, day out. And, you know, days off, whatever, like, the victim wasn't my best friend, but, you know, he called me like best friend. You know, like you were just always on the phone, and prosecutors and this and that, and it was just like this, it was a massive job. But of course, massive job with a one-man strike force being me, and I was also working the floor in the D's office. And like, I had all that effort, and you got 18 months. And, you know, time served, whatever else, I think he did, not very long more than what the trial actually took. Like, he didn't have much left, and I'm like, I hate this job. Yeah, like, that sucked. I think, look, for mine, I'm one of those guys that is maybe a little bit more wired earpish. I think everybody should go to jail, right? At a certain level, if you're at district court level, yes. If you've got a particular history, and look, there's pitfalls in everything. You know, like you look at, was it LA that introduced the 3 felonies and then you go away for life? And that just meant everybody's like, oh, I'm not leaving any witnesses around. I'll just kill the witness. And, you know, so it actually led to an increase in different crimes. But yeah, look, for me, I felt like, hey, if I'd proven to that level, and especially when you're looking at things like, you know, armed robbery, and you get 25 years and they're getting 3 years, and you're like, the hell is that about? Yeah. Right? You can get 25 and you got 3. Yeah. Like, and one slip of the hand on the trigger and that other person was dead. And, you know, like, I got guys like 18 armed robberies and they did like 3-5 years, something like that. You're like, you did 18, like, and I'm talking about fast food restaurants with kids and 14-year-olds working the register and, you know, like holding knives and things to them and stolen cars and the lot. Like 3-4 years, really? That's it? Oh, but he's got a drug addiction and he's got big ears and, you know, had to support his children. Yeah, you go get a second job, mate. You don't go and rob places. You don't stick it up your arm. Like, they're those things where I'm like, nah, that sucks.
What I've seen, actually, the judges that want to give a harsh sentence, they'll say things like, everyone's got a sob story. Everyone's got a sad story.
I like those.
Everyone got, beat by their parent when they were, jail. I'm like,
I think for us, the problem was the benchmark was so low because we kept having this expectation that the judge is just going to let them go, right? So whenever we got something, we were like, "Whoa, wow, that's surprising." I never saw a maximum sentence for anything in my time.
it's just to scare people.
I'm like 17 years, never saw it once. I had like some particularly horrific DVs that I was investigating, and that was in the district court, and it went. And both people, because there was actually a couple of people involved, both people went to jail for a while. And even though that happened, I still can't believe they were released because they planned to kill this woman, and they were released within a number of years. And then I had one where I was like, wow, this guy just got smashed. He was an addict. He got so sloppy and lazy they started breaking into his neighbour's place. They started off a suburb away, then slowly he's got closer and closer, and he actually broke into his neighbour's place, and ultimately to his demise. I got fingerprint and DNA hits, and it was just like, so I just had a collection of them. And I remember going into, while he was serving time at the time, I went in to give him some more, like sat with him, and he just went, yeah, I probably did it for drugs. Like that was him on the interview in the jail cell, like an actual facility. And I was like, okay. And it was just one of those ones that ended up then going to the drug court because you made admissions and you had this sort of addiction. And we thought more, you had in your mind this guy was just always going to be a recidivist for life. But I was in the proactive team in those days. I was working with anti-theft on this particular guy because he was killing us. He was probably responsible for at one stage 40% of the break-in enters happening in that entire LAC, right? Which is massive. We have a huge command. And then drug court. So we were waiting for him to come out because we're like, this guy will probably. So he was being watched, see what happens, and he looked like a different bloke. Like with that, he didn't have anything inside. He put on all this weight, got a job, and mate, nothing. He was my one. Like, what the hell? Well, the system actually works. It actually worked. Yeah. Oh my God. And I'm like, again, in 17 years, one bloke. But this is the thing. You have your own lens, right? So you only see what you see, and that's the benefit now of Anthony and I having the ability to look at the other side of it as well. So we get to work a lot with lawyers, and it's become quite an enjoyable process, and it's given us a really good niche in law too. We understand even whether it's family law or criminal law. Criminal law, obviously, we have always had that extra incentive, and we have that extra experience in. But even now with family law going, wow, like what happens in discovery and how easy it is to hide certain assets, and we're like, how easy it is for us to find them and going, hello. Yeah. Even in workers' comp matters, we're like, how I can just pay everybody out for anything. And you're like, what the hell is this? So it's just having the chance now to be on the outside in that space where you just see the vulnerabilities in these systems, and you're like, there's absolutely a need for lawyers, mate, because what is happening here? No one's sort of advocating, and we do a lot of sort of the downtrodden guy, the person, the underdog against the big entity, where you're like, this is bullshit. This is just bullshit, and like, so we'll work as part of that legal team to get them over the line, because sometimes why should a person be penalised because he just can't afford the same legal team that the other guy can?
Or sometimes someone just turns up with a good story, and they're very believable, and a little bit of digging proves that it's not right, but someone has to dig, and that's the problem we get.
Yeah. And so you help lawyers, I guess, fill in the gaps in their cases.
And look, in criminal law, I have to say, we didn't start out wanting to do criminal law, but we do criminal law matters. Okay.
What kind of criminal matters do you guys get involved in?
Everything and anything. So, look, more and more when lawyers are saying, look, well, this doesn't look like it makes a lot of sense to us, or like there's avenues that haven't been explored, we're looking at that. Yeah. Sometimes we just get given a brief and say, look, review that from an investigator's perspective. What have they missed? What have they done right? What have they done wrong?
Put together a subpoena list.
Yeah. We did one. I actually had one that we didn't really want to do, but it was a solicitor we worked well with. He's like, I need you to look at this, and it was a child sex offence, and I'm like, oh, this doesn't work. But we went through it, and what I really liked about that was I knew of the people investigated, like they were kick-ass investigators, and we went back to them, and in our review we said, well, they've actually missed something, and that is a further offence. So what I think, yeah. So here's our recommendations, and that is you're going to get smacked if you take this to trial. So you might want to think about talking to the prosecution and running with that, because I can't see a thing they've done wrong. Like this is a Mickey Mouse brief.
That is very helpful to know that you're fucked and your client's fucked and it's very helpful. You don't waste all this time trying to run a bullshit trial.
A lot of the legal work has also been, does this have legs? You know, in different things. So for those, we definitely the best time for us is early, because we see the brief and how it is, not after like either last. We always get the desperation. Can you find? And I'm like, you know, had we been around for the walkthrough, had we been around for the CCTV review, we could have actually given you something significant. And I think that's what also, you know, and I know I should wind up soon, but what freaked me out is who lawyers have used as alleged investigators. And it freaks me out that these people have just done an online course where there's no strong investigative background, nor knowledge of Evidence Act or Crimes Act or whatever, and then producing material that you can never use. You'll never be able to argue that into evidence. Because even sometimes, as you know, say surveillance, for example, we'll give you surveillance and it should have worked, but it's argued out. Well, thanks very much for everyone for this one. This was fantastic, Ray. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I know Anthony thoroughly enjoyed it. We love our work with lawyers, and mate, you come highly regarded, and I can see why. So thank you for giving up your time, mate. Much appreciated. We'd love to have you on again.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.
It was great.
Thanks.